Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting of Wednesday, May 20th, 2015. Can I have a roll call, please?
Salem Derby.
Present.
Dan Hagan.
Present.
Jennifer Hayes.
Here.
JP Kuzinski. Joe McCoy.
Here.
Dan Rist.
Here.
Tamara Smith.
Here.
Joy Winnie.
Here.
Nathan Ziegler.
Present.
We all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I think a motion for the approval of the minutes of May 6th.
So moved.
Minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
You didn't do them?
Is this mine?
Oh, sorry. Yours.
There are no minutes available yet. I would like to make a notification for the council. We have a very busy schedule looking at all public hearings and things that need to be accomplished. So we are going to take advantage of actually having a second meeting in June. A lot of times we don't do that. So there will be scheduled a June 17th meeting to finish up work for the spring. Unless there's a majority of people who said that's not something they could make. Is there a problem? I don't see that. Okay, so again, for the councilors and the public's record, we will have a city council meeting on June 17th. Public speak time. If there's anyone here from who would like to address the council from anything other than the public, please state your name and address, please.
Dallas Ikowski, 86 Pomeroy Street. I lived in this town all my life, and right about now, the road conditions in this town are disgraceful. They never have been this way. I'm just going to tell you a story. Just about a year ago, Tommy Newton and his crew found a water leak that they had for several years at the bottom of Pomeroy Street. Newton and the crew worked hard, and they did a great job. I'm not talking about the leadership. I'm talking about Newton and his crew, all right? Not the BPW, not the administration. The crew. The crew was good. I had no pitch at the crew. But the thing of it is, they put a valve in. Wait. They couldn't finish the job. I go into the BPW. Oh, we have no money for a piece of insulated pipe. I said, you got an enterprise fund. There's no money in the enterprise fund. I walked out, I quit. So late in the fall, they put the pipe in. They dug out the side of the road and everything else. The guys did another great job. They used a jumping jack, they packed it, there was hardly any settling. They never patched it. To this day, it is not patched. 1 year. It's disgraceful. I've been waiting for a meeting down there to go in there and talk to the BPW. I'm not going to talk to Joe Pip or Patty or the rest of them. I wanted to talk to the board. And there was no meeting. That's why I'm here tonight. Things have to be straightened out in this town. If you take a look where our budget is right now, the money isn't split up right. The schools can't keep getting the biggest part of the pie. It's about 70-some-odd%. It has to back up. So I'm all done. Good evening. I know nothing will happen.
Thank you for your time. Okay, if there's anyone else here for public speak time, we have a lot, I think, who people may be here, so we're going to try to keep it to like 5 minutes if you could, or no, 3 minutes actually, if you could. And also just refresh everyone's memory, due to open meeting law limitations, we can't have discussion, so you are basically here just to speak to us. And it's not we don't have interest, it's just we're limited by open meeting laws. So thank you, and just...
Robin Bielecki, I'm representing the East Hampton Community Center, 12 Clark Street. And it is our hope at the East Hampton Community Center that you would reconsider or consider alternative financing since we have been cut from this year's budget. We would very much like to see that there are alternative ways out there that can fund food pantries. We would like to ask that the City Council would consider those. We are very concerned about our children's program. We have 320 children that we feed all summer long when there's no school and they can't get breakfast and lunch. Last year it was over 63,000 meals in 10 weeks. And we don't want to see that go down. Right now, Hampshire County statistics are 1 in 7 children go to bed hungry. We don't want that to happen here. So I would just ask that you consider perhaps another alternative for funding the community center, if that is at all possible. We believe that it is. There is a group of citizens that have collected over 1,000 signatures on a petition that they will be presenting to you to ask for themselves too, that you would reconsider that proposal.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much. Is there anyone else from, who would like to speak to the council?
Hi, good evening, councilors. My name is Jim Ayers. I'm the executive director of the United Way of Hampshire County, based in Northampton, but which serves all of Hampshire County. The United Way and its partners serve about 28,000 Hampshire County residents each year. And of that group of people, there's actually more East Hampton residents than residents of any other town that are served through United Way organizations. And part of that impact has come through the work of the East Hampton Community Center and the work of Robin and her volunteers. So we were quite alarmed to see the decision not to include funding in the budget. We've looked at the investment that we've made in the community center each year as being a co-investment. United Way has brought roughly $20,000 to $30,000 each year to the community center, and that's been matched by the city as well. We know the decision was shaped by the anti-aid amendment, which is an amendment to the Constitution that was created 160 years ago. And when we look at that legislation, we see an intent that's different than how it seems to have been interpreted in the city. We've looked at other municipalities across the state which continue to provide municipal support for services, provided that they benefit the municipality. And in my mind, and I think in the minds of the United Way, money for food, disaster response, emergency response, places that hold support groups, all fit the definition of services to towns. My understanding from the advisories from the Department of Revenue are that cities are not able to make direct grants to nonprofits, but can contract for services through nonprofits. And what I'd like to offer for the United Way is we'd be very happy to connect the council, the mayor's office, others in the city with towns and cities across the state who are providing municipal support to look at how they've done that, look at how they're procuring it, look at how they're contracting that. We think it is possible. I'd also encourage the council and the mayor to seek additional clarification on this law. My understanding is that the Attorney General's office interprets this law somewhat differently than council has done here in the town. Again, I think what you've done historically is allowable under the law. I think it's always been the intent of the law, and I would think the AG's office would be willing to clarify that intent. I also serve on the board of the Mass Nonprofit Network, which probably will be asking for that clarification from the Attorney General's office, but given that it is more of a direct impact to the city of Northampton, I think that request would be a stronger request coming from the council than it would be from nonprofit organizations. So we're very sensitive to the situation you found yourself in, but hope that, as Robin said, you'll take a look at that and see what other options might be available. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councilor Higgin, I have a question for you. For what meeting will this budget line come up to be discussed?
That would be under
27.
the 27th,
Okay, so on May 20th.
Cultural and Recreation.
Okay, so on May 27th, if there are.
That would be for the community care, the community center.
For the community
Yeah,
center.
for the survival program, which was also cut, $4,000. That's the day before. That
That's
comes
under
up
Human
Human
Services.
Services. They're in separate line
Northampton
items.
Survival Center?
Yeah, Northampton Survival Center had a $4,000 reduction.
So Survival Center would be on next
Okay.
Tuesday. And
So just for the
Wednesday
if
be
someone in this,
communities.
if they care about this, the budget meetings where there would be allowed to be more of an open discussion, again, I said we're limited to, by open meeting laws, what we can do now, but if this is important to you and want to be part of that discussion, those are the dates, Tuesday, May 26th for funding to Northampton Survival Center, and Wednesday, the 27th for East Hampton Community Center. If there's anyone else who would like to address the council, Mayor Cadger.
Hi. First of all, thank you, Robin, and thank you for the information. The city of East Hampton is very interested in other methods that might provide funds to the community center. We are very supportive of the community center, and this was a very difficult thing that came up. I don't know if people know, but I actually was on the board of directors of the community center, and I remember one of my first things was to hire Robin. So I'm well aware of the needs of the community center. I'm a strong advocate through the city and also personally for them. We also are, we are looking at any different ways of revenues. We do provide them with Patrick Flynn funds yearly. We also do food drives and coat drives and all different things. And we feel that, this is a very, very dire necessity community center for our community and the services they provide. So we're constantly advocating so the residents know what is happening there. Barbara and I are also on the Helping Hand Society, which, our community is a very generous community, and they're constantly providing, for different agencies. We just voted in our last month meeting $5,000 for the community center, and plus we buy them their coats when needed, and chairs, tables, whatever necessities. The city of East Hampton also provided the community center, I believe last year, with out of a grant, I think it was a wellness grant for electricity upgrade in the kitchen. And so that was something that we were very happy to do. And I choose them every year as our charity organization when Channel 40 comes through. And they're looking for an agency to spotlight, and we do it right here. As far as the anti-aid amendment, our auditor Val is very firm on that. She sees no gray areas in it at all. I guess the word's prohibited, and I think you all have a copy of that. So it's very, very clear, and she is very adamant. And once she brought it to my attention, once the auditor tells me that this is prohibited by the Department of Revenue, the decision was made right then and there. The other thing I wanted to mention too is there's been some, communication about the way other cities and towns fund. I think what a lot of people don't realize, and miscommunications, is the East Hampton Community Center is not a city office. So that's where it comes into the private charitable agency. But Robin, through the community center, also has to fund, because of federal funding, they take care of a lot of the surrounding communities. She basically can't turn anybody away. So I'm hoping that the other communities are able to contribute too. I don't know if Northampton or Southampton or Holyoke or any of the other communities that she assists. I don't know if they contribute to the community center, and I hope that if there's ways that they can. Now, one of the things that came up was people were talking about CDBG grants, which are block grants, and for the city right now, we're not eligible for that because of certain guidelines. We've actually been regraded to CDF2 instead of CDF1, and it's basically because income purposes, which means we are actually over the medium income guidelines. So we're not eligible for CDBG funds, but there are entitled communities: Holyoke, Northampton, Amherst, Springfield. Those cities receive those funds annually without applying for them. We do not. We're not even able to apply this year, and we're hoping that maybe if we apply if eligible, we have the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission doing a survey now to see if we can, limit a real need targeted income area, and if so, then we would be able to apply. But the CDF2 funds are in total of $3 million, and the likelihood of us receiving any of them would be very slim. But when and if we are able to apply for CDB grant funds, we would definitely contact the community center to see how their needs might fit into this, as we have done in the past through when Stuart was here, and through our grants coordinator, Susan, we've contacted the community center to see how they could fit into applying for that. So I know our council president has been talking, and we've been talking amongst ourselves and with our personnel director, and we're looking at doing a citywide, all departments involved food drive. And I have contacted Robin about that, and luckily she's got some food drives planned right through August, which is great. But I just want everybody to know that we will continue to support them in any way we can, and that we are all strong advocates for the community center. And any questions, if they come up later on in the budget hearings, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Is there anyone, as far as this topic, is there anyone left? I'd like to if there is, I'd like to squeeze you in, because we should be moving on to public hearings. But if there's someone who wants to make a brief comment concerning this appropriation, this topic, I should say. Okay, so then we'll, no more public speak for now, so I will entertain a motion to open public
So
hearings.
moved. Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to open public hearings. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes. Councilor Hagan.
We have two public hearings tonight that involve finance. Both are supplemental appropriations, and I'll do a second reading on the first one. It's a supplemental appropriation dated April 8th. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $22,000 and is to be appropriated from the enterprise retained earnings in that amount and appropriated to the water portable chlorinator capital account in that amount, $22,000. The amount used will be for the following purpose: divide funds to purchase a portable chlorinator for the water department. This is the Director of Public Works appeared, and he through the mayor, and is not particularly happy with having to bring this because he's not sure that he needed it, but it's being ordered by the Department of Environmental Protection. And so therefore, it's something I think we kind of have to fund because they're ordering the city to do it. He thought maybe it was a little bit of overkill. I don't know if the mayor wants to speak to you.
You've got that exactly correct. And our DPW director is at another meeting tonight, so he's not able to be here. But as you can see, this one, hate to use the expression, is pretty cut and dried when it's a DEP mandate. And what Councilor Hagan was alluding to is our director feels by being at other directors' meetings throughout the state that the state has a tendency to mandate a little more harsher on our area than other parts of the state. So that's obviously something that he's going to be bringing up at his next meetings for the, the DPW highway meetings. So this is something that we don't have a choice on right now. When DEP mandates it, we have to do it.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address the council concerning that appropriation? Not being seen. Okay, Councilor Hagan.
Unless there's any other questions from the council, I'll make a motion that the East Hampton City Council approve the supplemental appropriation in the amount of $22,000 from retained earnings to water portable chlorinator capital. For the purpose is to purchase a portable chlorinator for the water department.
Second.
A motion and a second for the supplemental appropriation of $22,000 for the portable chlorinator. Any additional discussion? Comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
Second public hearing tonight involving finance is another supplemental appropriation, which I'll do a second reading on, also dated April 8th, 2015. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $200,000 and is to be appropriated from free cash in that amount, $200,000, and appropriated to General Stabilization Fund. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to transfer free cash into the General Stabilization Fund. This is a type of appropriation we kind of like to see, because that means we got near the end of the fiscal year and there's a couple $100,000 which we can put in stabilization, and that would allow us to use it. And again, the mayor can, or the finance director could correct me if I'm wrong, but that would allow us to use it on a 2/3 vote for an emergency, whereas free cash kind of gets frozen until October, November, whenever everything's approved by the state. So,
Did you want to speak to that anymore, Mayor? Or?
So this is exactly that. If we don't do anything with the free cash, it just goes back into the fund and stays there, but it will not become, and it'll become available next year in free cash. Usually our auditor is able to certify free cash very early, which is October, but still for October for us not to be able to, touch any funds if we desperately in dire needed them. So it's just, to me, a little bit of a cleaner way of tucking it in stabilization. We know the counselors are always like to see money in stabilization, so we just thought it was a better use instead of just letting it go back and then waiting to get it again in October.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address the council concerning that appropriation? Not being seen. Councilor Hagan.
There's no other questions. I'll make the following motion that the East Hampton City Council approve the supplemental appropriation in the amount of $200,000 that be appropriated from free cash and appropriated to the General Stabilization Fund in that amount to transfer free cash in the General Stabilization.
Second.
A motion and a second for the $200,000 supplemental appropriation of $200,000 from free cash to general stabilization. Any additional comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain? Motion passes. That's it for you. Okay, next one I believe is Councilor Derby's zoning ordinance amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the council knows, in our recent history, we've had a sign come forward and appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals, at which point they overrode our zoning. So the ordinance subcommittee did draft a sign ordinance, so in the future, if any signs of this nature came through, they would have to follow the criteria that we felt made sense for East Hampton, as opposed to not having any criteria. So as you can see in front of you, basically what we created was a sign specific to service stations. So the only businesses that would be able to have this type of sign, which would display the cost of fuel, would be service stations. And so we created criterias for that, and the ordinance subcommittee approved this 3-0, and the planning board, I believe, gave it a unanimous approval as well.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public, I mean from the city or the public who would like to address the council concerning this ordinance change? No? Okay, back to you again, Councilor Derby. You have anything more to add?
I don't. If anybody does, I mean, there was a couple of the things that caused discussion in our meetings on this was the height that the numerals should exceed, and we found 16 inches to be a reasonable height. We chose to not allow digital signs to be placed on the awnings of gas stations. They would have to be in the freestanding signs. And we also had learned a lot about how you measure the brightness of signs. So we did include what the industry standard was, which is in the unit of foot candles of brightness that should be used by these signs. Mm-hmm. So those were the only things that really gave us some debate, okay. But we were able to work through them.
Does anyone have any questions for Councilor Derby? Councilor Hagan?
Oh,
sorry.
No, not really a question. I just want to say at least the councilors were on a couple of terms know I was one of the big proponents against LED signs. Particularly, it's not my thing, but I think this was a well thought out proposal, because I don't feel the one business that came forward and went to the zoning board and had it turned over should have exclusivity now, and I think it's a reasoned way to put everybody on a fair playing field, level playing field. So I certainly would support it.
Okay. Councilor Smith, I see your hand.
I just wanted to reiterate that one of the important things that we really needed to do on ordinance was to standardize light measure. And I really think a part of why this came into question was advancing technology and going from one type of light to another type of light, and we can assume that this will continue to happen as we go through history and find different methods of how to light more efficiently. So having a standardized measure on how to measure the brightness of light versus having ordinances that go, where every type of light. I am appreciative of how simplistic in a very complicated, nuanced way about signage that actually creates that space in the ordinance. So,
Councilor Rist.
I want to echo that. I think, being a lighting designer myself, the illumination section and its specificity is excellent, because one of the things that concerned me, and I also echo Councilor Hagan's remarks, is that I'm sorry, I'm disturbed by conversations in the audience. Is that messaging signs that are going to be put in business zones or even in residential zones might occur if we didn't be specific. And I have no problem with this and the specificity of an LED sign for service stations, which to me, yes, we were forced into it somewhat, but I've turned myself around on it thinking that they have a specific need because fuel prices change quite often. They're not allowed to put up, also we sell whatever the convenience store sells. They're only allowed to put fuel up, And I appreciate the specificity, both in illumination and what they can do. And I think we will be debating messaging signs. I know you're looking at that, but this is a good first step. Thank you.
Okay.
There would have been some concern about blinking or flashing. Has that been addressed in the ordinance or discussed at the committee level?
Well, these signs don't blink or flash.
They could if we don't prohibit it.
I think they're prohibited in another part of the ordinance.
They are prohibited, like blinking and flashing signs are prohibited within the sign ordinance. I didn't specifically say it here because fuel LED signs don't blink or flash. There's no,
Today.
there would be no point to it, other than maybe annoying people as they drive down the street.
In my
If
opinion,
you can,
it
I'll
would be
tell you what,
annoying.
I'd be happy to make an amendment if you can give me one example of a blinking or flashing number sign that you've seen.
I wouldn't want to see one in the future is my concern. Not that we haven't seen them we've seen them in the past, but that would really, I just wonder if we need a prohibition in that section as opposed to elsewhere. If there'd be some way to incorporate that. I must say I wasn't a fan of the digital signs anyway, but I've come to grow with them as I see more and more of them.
I would say that, just to address that, I would say within this, it says such signs may not display light of such intensity or brilliance to cause glare or otherwise impair the vision of a passing driver. I would say a blinking sign might be construed to do that.
I guess I would think that it would need to be a little more specific if we were to prohibit it. Maybe other councilors don't feel this way, but I wouldn't want to have East Hampton be the first ones to have blinking signs. If we could avoid that, I'd love to put it in the ordinance. So we could make it clear to any vendor who would be putting in these new signs where we stand about this.
Councilor Rist?
How secure are you in the other zoning regs that blinking signs are not allowed? Any kind of blinking, whether it's an incandescent blinking sign, or is that very specific? Are you sure of that or not?
I'm sure that we prohibited blinking illuminated signs, but I can't reference the
Section.
section off the top of my head.
I'd have no objection to putting another line in, but I'd hate to. We could put off to vote for this until they come back with that. Can we do that? Can we amend this?
Oh, sure.
This evening? We can add an amendment. Yeah, we can add an amendment. Although I'm confident that wouldn't be allowed. I don't think that's in the sign ordinance. Flashing of any kind would be disturbing to me. I don't know what to do.
Any other questions or comments? So I mean, I guess we'll just go as we usually do. Councilor Derby will have a motion, and then if there's an amendment that we can vote on that separately. So Councilor Derby, you ready for a motion?
Yeah, I move to accept the LED sign as presented, section 10.04 of the East Hampton sign ordinance.
Second.
Okay, a motion is second for the acceptance of the LED sign, section 10.4. Any additional discussions or amendments?
I'd like to add a section E, if I may, where it would read, signs that flash or blink are prohibited.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second it for discussion.
Okay, so there's a motion to add a section E about blinking signs to be prohibited. Any additional discussion on that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Okay, motion passes, so that will be met. Now, going back to the initial motion, and there's a second on that. Any additional discussion on that initial motion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes with that one
As
amendment.
As amended.
Barbara, you need that?
You just got it.
You want that to Barb?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
And that concludes Councilor Rist, Administrative Code Proposals.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unfortunately, we were not able to complete our discussion on the administrative code proposals. If there's anyone here from the administration or from the public that would like to speak to it, we certainly would like to hear your thoughts, but I will move to continue this public hearing after that. Is there anyone from the public that want to speak? Mayor Kepp.
I just want to make sure that if the counselors need any more information, I provided additional information after the last meeting. So if you need any other additional information, just please let me know and I'll have it ready for your next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if there's no more questions or discussion, I'll move to continue the administrative co-proposals public hearing to the next meeting. Due to the fact that we have a deadline to do this, we have a 60-day deadline. If we don't do it, it just passes. I think the council should speak to it, so it has to be the next meeting.
Which is June 3rd. So we have a motion and a second on continuing the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. So I'll entertain a motion, to close the public hearings.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Communications, what's the board and official, do you want to?
Just to let the councilors know, in your packet, you've got a recommendation on the building sign amendments from the planning board. That item is already under discussion and is up for a public hearing, I believe the ordinance committee will set. Thank you.
Okay. General correspondence, mayor communications, anything additional?
Just very quickly, just to update the counselors. First of all, I apologize, I'm going to have to leave early because I have to go to I'm going to the Dollars for Scholars, I'm speaking there. But you might have heard, I'm sure you probably have read, if you follow Mary Cerez, about the 15 Cottage Street apartments. I was over there Monday night until about 6:30 with our building commissioner, and he did issue the certificate of occupancy. I just want to really try to clear up any miscommunication. The residents were basically put up in hotels for a while. I think there was probably about 8 families that were waiting to get in, and the delays were very long. The delays were probably about 6, well, they should have really been in by the first of the year. So it was frustrating for the people that were waiting for their apartments to get in there. Their furniture, our building commissioner did allow the furniture to go in so they wouldn't have to store that. And the owners were putting them up in hotels at the owner's expense. But during all this, when it became very frustrating for the new residents, there was some miscommunication about the city holding them up on inspection-wise or not being not getting the inspections fast enough. So that is completely a misinformation, untrue. I can tell you, and I can vouch for all our inspectors, especially the fire and building, that they were there. They were 100% accessible to do these inspections. Were there numerous times. The contractor was did not just have the completed items ready. It was for safety. They would not provide or sign off on a certificate of occupancy if the building was not safety according to our mass regulations. So in the meantime, the miscommunication came from somewhere in the middle, like it usually does, but the owners of the property have stopped in almost on a daily basis and called me every day to make sure that they know that to thank our building commissioner and our inspectors for being so available and really going above and beyond. I mean, they were there sometimes 6 to 8 o'clock at night. So I just want to make that clear that we are very proud of our employees, and the owners could not be happier with the services our city provided.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to standing committees, Rules and Government Relations, Councilor Rist.
As I indicated, we will continue our discussion, and I would like to schedule a meeting if Councilor Hayes is available. I haven't had a chance to discuss it with you. For May 28th, unfortunately, there's very few days left in the week because of the Finance Committee meetings. That is a Thursday at 6 p.m. downstairs, if Councilor McCory is available. If Councilor Hayes, you're not available, then I will talk to the clerk to see what other
Thursday
date.
the 28th?
Yeah, 6 o'clock.
Can do.
All right, so Mayor Cadger, if you're available that evening, 6 p.m., Councilor Krasinski also, you'd like to be here. Thank you, Mr. President.
That concludes Finance, Councilor Hayden.
Tonight in Finance, first thing I'd like to do is announce next 2 subcommittee meetings will be Tuesday the 26th, in which we will take up the sections of the budget, Section 3 Education, Section 5, Human Services, and Section 7, Debt and Interest. And then the following night on Wednesday, the 27th, we'll be taking up Section 6, Cultural and Recreation, Section 4, Public Works, Section 10, Enterprise, and then Sections 11 and 12, which is the summary proposal and the estimated income proposal. So that's just to schedule what the Finance Subcommittee will be doing this week. The first thing I'd like to do is set a public hearing for the FY16 budget for the 3rd, June 3rd, the first meeting in June, because hopefully we will have all the sections approved by that time. So if I could put that in the form of a motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to set the public hearing for the 2016 budget on 6/15, June 3rd. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
And I'd also like to set public hearings on 3 items for supplemental appropriations also for the June 3rd meeting. And that would be for the $34,000 unanticipated overtime cost for the DPW, $19,810.44 for a sick leave bank buyback for a retiree, and $16,000 for self-contained breathing apparatus bottles for the fire department.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to set public hearings for the supplemental appropriations of $34,000, $19,810.44, and $16,000. That's June 3rd, 6:15 p.m. These chambers. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
I also will have some new items which we could take up under new business. I believe there's 5 new appropriations which hopefully we'll be able to get to at the end of our meetings this week. But I won't set public hearings until the 17th on those, in case we have to have one more subcommittee meeting.
I was gonna hope we could have another
Right,
subcommittee.
if we get to going late. So I will make a decision this week on whether we're going to take those up or take them up at another subcommittee.
Okay, we'll
just wanted to add.
Councilor Riss?
We just need to get these appropriations passed before June 30th, am I correct? So June 17th is plenty of time. Thank you.
Okay.
The final item, and this has been on the agenda for a while, is the request to accept Section 260, Chapter 165 of the Acts of 2014. This was up once before, and I think it was Councilor Derby asked if we'd take it back to subcommittee, which we did. We had further discussions, and I guess just in a way of updating, what this is it would take teacher retired healthcare costs and make them part of net spending for the school department. It would have no effect on this year's budget, would have no effect on Chapter 70 monies. What it would do is it would put that expense as part of the state every year sets a minimum standard or a minimum amount that we have to fund. This particular year, and I guess it's the easiest way to explain it, this particular year, if the mayor's budget is approved as is, we're approximately just under $900,000 above what we have to fund the schools for. If we pass this tonight, the amount in retired teachers' health care is approximately $500,000, so we would be, in a sense, $1.4 million more than we would have to appropriate. Now, some say that there's kind of 2 ways of looking at it, that makes it sound like we're doing better. It really has no effect. I mean, the dollars that are given to the schools are the dollars that are given to the schools, and what the schools can use with those dollars are specific. Some say the perception would be that if we're giving more or that we're over, it would be better, but others look to future mayors and future city councils, because this is a thing if we pass it. It's a one-time thing. We either pass it or don't pass it or don't take it up. But this is a one-time shot for us to do it. I will put it through as a positive motion when we get to that point, because it did go through the Finance Committee. But I think, at least, and I'm only speaking for myself, I've reconsidered a little my position, and I'll let the other 2 members speak to their position. And now I'm kind of open for hearing other councilors' opinions on it. And while that was the vote of the subcommittee, I think certainly I'm open to the other councilors' opinions.
Actually, before, do we have school committee?
We do have school committee.
We do. Usually, I said we don't take public comment and during this section, but we do have our school committee chair and a member here as well, who I would just like for the council to get. I don't think we heard their contribution, so if you would like to come to the podium, just state your name and just...
And I did provide all you with a letter that from the chairman, Deb.
Hi, I'm the chairperson of the school committee, Deborah Lusnia. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to say a few words. The school committee would really very much encourage you not to support the proposal in front of you. And our concern is not with our current mayor or our current administration. We see this as merely a change, a calculation change, or for reporting purposes and not harmful to us with our current administration. But our concern is the future. We don't know who we'll have for a mayor 5, 10 years down the road. We don't know what our city council will look like at that time. And by making this change, it would enable future leadership in our city to cut the funds for instructional services for the schools substantially. I believe the retired insurance, health insurance costs is equivalent to about $400,000 currently. And they could utilize up to that amount to cut directly from instructional services for the schools, which, as you can imagine, would be completely devastating to our school system. So even smaller cuts, legally, you know, the wide range could happen in terms of the cuts that the school system could endure as a result of having this minimum net school spending met with this additional insurance costs. So we would just encourage you not to approve this in the interest of protecting adequate funding for the school department for the future, for our kids, for the health of our city, for not exacerbating our school choice and charter problems. More cuts equal more problems with charter and choice, which that negatively impacts all city departments. So we would just encourage you to think about that and protect funding for direct instruction for our students in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Any Council Rist?
I just wanted to, I know the mayor's gone, but if the finance director would like to speak to this, I think we should allow it this evening, if you would.
Finance director, if you want.
Because she did make a lot of statements during the subcommittee meetings, but the other councilors should be willing to hear them.
So I don't know if anyone has any questions, but did you want to ask a question?
Oh, go ahead. I do have a question, though.
Just answer the question.
Oh, well, I was just wondering, again, with the school financing is very complex, and I know even with grants, sometimes it requires maintenance of effort, that you continue to provide a certain amount of funds to certain areas, otherwise you can't receive additional funds. But also with the Chapter 70 funding, and again, I'm not fluent in this area, but it was my understanding before that some districts were getting less funding because they were providing more, the city was providing more on their end, and therefore the state was giving less. So I was just wondering whether or not those considerations were taken in.
Well, I had heard those comments also. However, when I read the Chapter 70, there's no indication of that. It's really based on income of the community. And so from what I understand, and I can't back into the Chapter 70 formula, but I did have 2 separate conversations, one with a representative from the Department of DESE asking him that direct question, and he said that no, it didn't have any impact at all, and I, because our concern would be, what is the, if any, the financial impact to the city should they adopt this, and he said it really wouldn't change anything. And I also addressed that question with our outside audit firm and asked him, and he said that he too had heard those rumors, and basically those had all been disputed because the state had said, well, when we originally determined this was the case, and they were like, well, show us, and it's not the case. So the amount that the city contributes to the district does not affect what the funds come from the state. So if we not over contribute, that's a bad choice of words, I'm sorry. If we contribute in excess of what is the minimum requirement, that is not to our detriment, but it's more of a benefit to the community.
But it sounds like at one time that did affect the amount that the state
I don't think it ever did. I
Okay.
think that was sort of what people were interpreted, but if you, when I read Chapter 70, I didn't make any indication to general fund budget and how they fund the state.
Okay. I mean, that would obviously be a big concern if suddenly we're adding an additional 500,000 and the state would look at it and say, oh, well, since the city's kicking in an additional $500,000, we can cut them back by X
Like
number.
I said, I'm not an expert in either, but I did ask the question
Wonderful.
twice of people who should know more than I.
Councilor Derby.
So I'm just curious. I guess I'm struggling with this a little bit. What is the benefit of passing this?
To be honest, it doesn't really make an effect in my mind either way. However, it's one of those things where this is a school expense, and we do report it as a school expense. It's just, you know, kind of what category do we report it in? And I think that the act says that we're basically a choice was made when they created the formula, saying, do you want to include this or not include this? I believe that at the time, East Hampton was one of the very few communities that didn't offer retiree insurance, so therefore we couldn't elect to include it. Don't know what they would have done at the time had we, or if we had chosen to admit it anyway. A lot of the communities that are, you know, were very proactive in getting this act said, you know, it was an arbitrary choice made by someone who didn't understand the consequences, or that, you know, the cost of health insurance has increased so much that what used to be a small amount is now a large amount. But other retiree benefits are counted as net school spending, so I think it's just a reporting thing.
So, Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong. My guess changes. Well, my interpretation of what Councilor Derby is asking is that if you ever got into a situation where we as a city couldn't match the required spending by the state right now, that you get fined. Am I correct? That
is the current situation. So you do get, if you can't meet minimum net school spending, one, you're forced to come up with that spending so that you at least meet the minimum. And then the second thing is that there are fines for communities who, at the end of the day, sort out their budget and didn't meet it. I believe that there is a part of this act is to waive those penalties for communities so they can allow what this what's considered school spending expense to not put them in that situation.
I think I saw Tamara for Councilor Smith.
I was just going to ask, when's the last time East Hampton was not able to meet a school budget?
I don't believe
Or,
that was
you
ever.
know.
I don't believe that. That's
Okay, so we
but
don't-
but I honestly, I don't know. I haven't been here.
I was just wondering if
30
there's
years,
a clear
but-
precedent where this keeps coming up and we need to prepare for it, or if this is just, there's a possibility, but we have no history to back that up with.
We don't have a history to back it up, and I guess I get where you're going with this, but this is, but I don't think it changes the way that we fund the school, and just like the school department's concerned about the future, we don't know the future either. And we know that the net school spending requirement is a moving target. It goes up every year. We do not exceed net school spending by as much as we used to in prior years, and that doesn't necessarily relate to how much of a percentage of the general fund that we spend on the school department. We try and keep that pretty level.
Continue.
So if I understand, on the one side, if we say yes to this, this could come off the backs of our current students if suddenly there was a dire change in administration and that $400,000 we decided this is where it needs to come from. So if I was to vote yes on this, I would be doing so with approximately $400,000 possibility consequence for my children currently in school. What would negate that enough to make that possibility even worth it? I just don't understand what the positive would be, except for preparing for the worst case scenario, which we have never seen, versus the potential of $400,000 being eradicated from available funds for children's education. And I understand all of the conversation that this is money that's being spent anyway, but it has not been appropriated that way. So the circumstance is different enough for me to really be concerned.
Even if it was included in net school spending, it is never appropriated as part of the school budget. It is always appropriated as part of the general budget, and that would not change. So what changes is a reporting mechanism because all employee benefits are paid in the employee benefits section of the budget, and they're not part of school budget. But then we do another section of the report. There are 2 times that report's given. There's an estimate at the beginning of the year saying this is how much we think we're going to spend on schools, and that includes all school spending, not just what's considered net and what's not considered net. And then the lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. So that wouldn't change. So the only thing that would change is in the projected. This is what we think we'll spend on net school spending, which is always part of the budget project to make sure that we're well within what is legally required and we aren't planning to put ourselves in a bad situation. And then at the end of the report, sometime in the fall, you get a report from the auditor saying this is what actually was spent and how it relates to school spending. Because, of course, like health insurance, like anything, is an estimate. These are the employees. This is their current coverage. You know, people have growing families. They have reduced families. They leave the system. Other people come in.
Councilor Durbin?
Can I just, Councilor Hagan, maybe you can help me with this. Can you help me with the numbers one more time?
Yeah.
Currently, right now, by how much are we exceeding the state's minimum?
I believe in this budget, the current budget that's in front, it's like $890,000.
So roughly 900,000.
900,000.
And that's currently, we're exceeding by roughly
By
900,000 without including
Including it.
And so then
and it's actually, the figure is closer to I think it's 513,000.
So when we're talking about being able to cut off the back end without getting fined because we wouldn't be meeting the minimum spending per pupil, we're talking about being able to cut a lot more than 400,000.
You could cut the 900.
We're talking about cutting 900.
Right. You couldn't cut the other 5 because that we don't include it.
We don't
but
include
you could, the current mayor could cut
900,000.
Right. Or right.
Right. And so, and I just want to put this out there. You know, we did start this meeting tonight with public speak time with, a former counselor saying we spend too much money on schools, we should fix the roads. So, us thinking that a new administration wouldn't be willing to, sacrifice schools, I think is naive on our part.
If I could just just in response, I think, and again, while Melissa's up there, while it came affirmatively to us from the mayor, I mean, the mayor and the finance director have been pretty neutral on whether we should do it or not, which kind of took me back a little after the first meeting we had, because I thought when it comes to us, it's usually something they want. But in all, the auditor is definitely for having it. I spoke to the auditor, so she's definitely for it. And the one other fact that I'll let Dan talk is 2/3 of cities do it, and only a third don't. Not that, just to put in perspective of what it is. But again, I've kind of come along, and I did look, Tamara, for you, over a 5-year period, we've done approximately between 600,000-700,000, always over. At least I went back 5 budgets. This is actually a little more. So, sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's fine. I saw Councilor Riss first. Councilor Riss? Yeah.
I just wanted to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, the administration's neutrality was based on the fact that this legislative act had to be presented to us. This is a one-time thing, and they felt they didn't have the right, if they didn't present it, they would be acting in our behalf. This is a legislative approval. This is our business. Their neutrality speaks to the fact that it doesn't really enter into the factor of whether we spend so much of a percentage out of our city funds. We spend approximately 63%. The auditor was firm on that no matter what we do, whether we change this or not, her being in favor of it gives us a tool for the future. And she felt that if any future mayor wanted to change the budget, they would be changing that percentage, which would create havoc. Now, hearing what Councilor Derby, I've been going back and forth on this since debate happened 2 months ago. Councilor Derby's point is well taken in that we're $900,000 over our spending right now, our net requirement. And maybe it'll be $1.4 million when we add this. So some future mayor, having former Councilor Psychowski's thoughts in mind, said, oh, we can cut $1 million, we're still $400,000 over. That is something that I had considered and didn't consider that they wouldn't do, but I can see your point on that. That changes my opinion on this. I'm sorry, I think I'm going to have to change my vote. Because it gives the impression, and you know, it's perception because the money's not changing. And I hate non-net and net spending. I think we give money to our schools, and busing is something we do for our students as well as buying them textbooks. I hate the way this is accounted for. I think it should be all one budget. It is, and it still is, which is what the auditor was saying. It's 63% of our budget. However, given the current fiscal methodology, that point you brought is well taken. A future mayor could say, well, we won't get fined and we're still $400,000 over. I think that's important. It's a perception, and I have to say that that's changed my mind.
Councilor Winnie.
Being on the council as long as Dan and I have, well, over 15 years, we have never, or 20, oh my God.
20, George.
Yeah.
Lost track, huh?
Yeah, well, we've never level funded or not come to what our spending should be for the schools, ever. Before this, I was on town committee, way back when we had a select board and so forth. Even then, we never level funded the schools to where we ever came below the net spending criteria of what we had to do. And that was long before ed reform came into the whole thing. I absolutely see your points about a mayor coming in and devastating the budget. However, I think that in saying that, you're discounting the education level of our people that vote us into office and vote the mayor into office. We all know here that it becomes very political during the time of elections, and whoever's running for mayor or city council or school committee all put it out there that they're going to support X, Y, and Z, and you can be darn sure that if they're not doing, if they get elected into office, not do X, Y, and Z, they will be held accountable by the voters. And I firmly believe that. That's why we have a democracy, and that's why we have the voting system that's set up the way that it is. I just look at this as a basic house cleaning item. Working in the schools as Nathan and or counselor and all of us, it's a way of reporting, end of the year reports. It just cleans things up a little bit. I guess I'm sitting on the side of Rosie happy. I don't think that any mayor would ever come in and do something like that. That's just my own personal opinion, because I think that we are all held to our feet to the fire by the voters that put us into office. And a mayor is here for 2 years. Yes, a mayor could come in for 2 years, devastate our city, but you could be darn sure that that mayor would not come back in for another term. Or would we, or the school committee? So that's just my little...
And I guess for me as a parent, those 2 years is too much of a risk. Even that 2-year term, to be already having as many cuts that we've had to have to our school system, to even put that out there as a possibility of having someone have the ability to use that in that worst dire way, for me is too much of a risk to balance my children's future against.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments on that?
Just one final comment. Something that...
Are you through with the...
Oh, I'm
okay,
through with
thank
it,
you.
yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
Just one further comment. What kind of was changing my opinion on it is I got thinking the school department is the only one that we actually set aside the amount for specifically for the school teachers. I mean, that in a separate thing. We also pay or in our budget is money set aside for city retirees. And in there, we don't factor in like there's 40 retired police officers, so that should count over here to the police budget or the fire budget. I mean, that's just all city employees. I guess that got me thinking, why are we setting teachers in a different category than the rest of our city? They're all city employees. I understand the budgeting's a little different because the school committee has a little autonomy with the superintendent to spend the chunk of money that is appropriated by the mayor and the city council. So that was just one other thing that kind of led me to start changing my opinion.
Any more comments before?
Just a general kind of question about net and non-net school spending.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm
There is
sorry.
no generalizations.
Come on back. Do you know why are these two categories? Because it always seemed to me that it made sense if it's a school budgeted item, it really should be a school budgeted item. And it should be simple. There should be no non-net and net. Why do we have it?
State.
I understand it's a state system. Maybe the system's wrong. Maybe it's broken in this case with regard to this specific.
That's a different meeting.
I know, but so because we shouldn't be putting in the position of we all support the schools. We want them to be strong. Why are we not counting something that's a school expense? Which we won't be able to if we don't make this decision in favor of doing it tonight. Okay, I understand that. We want to have strong schools. It seems to me that if we were saying we have $1.4 million over the net, over what we're required to spend, that would go send a message to the world and anyone who would consider East Hampton schools that, geez, they really were spending a lot more money than they have to spend as required by the state. Why does the state create these two categories?
So I think Joy gave me these words, so I'll give you credit. So I think that typically, if you look, I wish I had brought it with me today. So the biggest part of non-net is transportation. So there's like 4 categories, I think, in non-net. So transportation is the biggest. Crossing guards. So walking to school is not part of education either.
Yet you got to get them there.
Yeah, you got to get them. And then also there's a small amount for field use or something with the park. It's an interdepartmental agreement charge. And then there's insurance for retired. Now, health insurance for active teachers is counted in net. Retirement benefit, the actual payment for your retirement check that you get after you retire as a teacher, or that's not fair, it's not the teacher, it's the school employees that are part of the East Hampton school system, is included in net. So typically the net school spending is directed around staffing and personnel of people who have or had direct interaction with the children, and why that doesn't include bus drivers, Joy, I don't know. Or crossing guards.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Councilor Quinn?
And so I think that's why there's been a big push to make this change, because it seems to be the anomaly in the reporting.
So we'd be taking the expense that is for teachers who have retired and putting that into the category of the net.
Right.
But still excluding the transport people.
You can't.
Right. That is not a change that's being looked at this time, and nor was it ever. So this particular thing was considered at one time, and options were taken by communities to either include it or not include it. I said we didn't offer that at that time, so hence we could not include it. I don't know what we would have done,
Just to clarify, again, going into a little research, I think the things that can't be included are long-term debt, school lunches, school transportation,
So long-term
community
debt,
usage of the schools, and capital outlays. Those were just some of the stuff I
so
said.
the long-term debt is really the building.
Is right.
Right, like, so
That's
the
just-
new
those are
school
the things
building
that
is,
can't-
is non, yeah, because bricks and mortar are not included.
That doesn't count toward this.
Any more, before we let her go, any more questions for, Finance Director? Okay, Councilor Hagan, thank you. Yes, sir.
I don't know if the
Motion.
council, I'll make a motion unless there's other
You can
council.
still speak to it. so don't-
Yeah, after you make the motion.
This has to be made in the affirmative, so I'll make it in the affirmative. To accept the 4-year phase-in toward inclusion of retired teacher health insurance cost in determining net school spending compliance commencing in the fiscal year 2016 as specified in Chapter 260 of Chapter 165 of the Acts of 2014 for the East Hampton School District.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We got a motion and a second for, to accept Section 260 of Chapter 165 Acts. Again, I would just ask for time. We all spoke. If you are going to speak again, probably make it brief and just summarize what you said before. Councilor Rist?
Briefly, because this was stated at our Finance Committee meetings, the 2/3 of the state, cities, and towns that have accepted this, a lot of them were accepting it because they are not very high on net spending, and they needed it to prevent a fine. So a lot of communities who are on the edge, we were told, we're doing this. And I just wanted you to put that out there. We're not on the edge.
Okay, any last minute comments before a vote? Okay, all those in favor, okay, so this is in favor of it, so, do you want a roll call for this? Okay, we'll do a roll call for this then. So, again, in accepting Section 20, which is allowing retirement being considered in net spending is a yay, a nay is not. So, all those in, roll call, sorry.
Dan Hagan,
No.
Jennifer Hayes,
No.
J.P. Kwasinski,
No.
Joe McCoy,
Nope.
Dan Rist,
No.
Tamara Smith,
No.
Joy Winnie,
No.
Nathan Ziegler,
No.
Salem Derby.
No.
Unanimous. No.
Moving on, Councilor Hagan, that concludes for you?
That concludes finance,
Okay.
except for the new business.
Right, Public Safety, Councilor Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I've run into the same issue that Councilor Rist has with scheduling a meeting for public safety, having Dan Hagan be on all of the finance subcommittee meetings. So hopefully we're going to be able to speak and put one together. We are continuing the Paul Street extension. We are continuing this, rewriting the street acceptance protocol, and we are also continuing with the amending of the traffic rules and orders for a stop sign at Spring Street and Chestnut Street. We do have feedback from the chief, so that's what we will be discussing sometime before the next city council meeting. I'm hopeful. This concludes.
Thank you very much. Appointments, Councilor Winnie. Before I turn over to Councilor Winnie, we had continued on a previous appointment, and so, again, this is a little bit out of step that we're going to allow some additional discussion if anyone would like to come up and say something concerning one of the appointments that was carried over. I would, again, like to keep this, because it was vetted in subcommittee and it was also vetted again. This is not I don't want this to be another discussion, but sort of on the basis of public speak, where if someone would like to speak in favor or against appointment, make that statement, and then I'm not looking for any more additional discussion. So, Councilor Winnie.
All right, thank you. So with that being said, we will discuss the first appointment, which is a carryover from our last meeting of Dennis LaCourse to the Board of Public Health. And I will now turn this over to the president to take control of the podium and anyone that is here from the public that would like to speak to that.
So if there's anyone who would like to speak either for or against this appointment, please come to the podium and state your name and address, please.
Good evening. Jason Duda, 15 Mutter Street, East Hampton. I'd like to speak in regards to Dennis Hagan. I'm looking at you, so that's what happened. Dennis LaCourse. In my career, if you want to call it, of at least 11, 12 years on the planning board, I had a lot of interaction with Mr. LaCourse, and as he was, the head of the Board of Health, or he was the health agent. And in that time, I found him to be so very comprehensive in his job and knowledgeable and willing to work with people. He did his job, and sometimes people didn't like it, but he did it for the right reason. And as far as him being on the Board of Health, I can't think of anyone who would be more qualified to be a volunteer there. And I really would hope that you would approve his appointment by the mayor, because I think he is really the right candidate for the job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who would like to, from the public, would like to address the council or statement?
I don't have a statement, but I have this that's addressed to you guys. I've been told it's in relation to this topic. Can you open it?
Yeah, I'm going to call a 5-minute recess, and so if we be back here at 7:15. And
Why do we have to do that?
well, I mean, does the councilor want to read this letter? Are we going to read it out loud?
Just read it out loud.
Okay.
It's going to be entered into the record
If the,
anyways.
the appointments chair can read the letter because it's entered into open meeting law.
Okay.
You gotta read it.
I will give it to you when I'm done reading it, Barbara, so it can be entered into the record.
Long letter.
It's dated May 20th, 2015. Dear City Councilors, Dennis LaCourse has always presented himself in a professional manner and has been prompt when dealing with the Board of Health issues at my place of business, whether it be through phone conversations or visits to the store. He's always given me plenty of information and time to get any problems or concerns resolved. He would return my calls promptly and always address my questions professionally. Product recalls are at the top of the concern in our industry. Dennis and I would communicate and handle these issues immediately. He's given me the tools to help run my business in a safe and professional manner. In closing, I feel I've had a solid working relationship with both Dennis and Jackie through the years of dealing with both of them. Best regards, Michael Superson, Vice President, Big East Foodland Incorporated.
Okay. So, is there anyone else who would like to come to comment? Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I am Jackie Duda, and I am your health agent here in East Hampton, and no, I'm not related to Jason Duda. I'd like to clarify that whenever. It's been a little bit controversial putting Dennis forth, and some of you have even asked me for my opinion, and I've declined to give that opinion, because I don't really feel it's my position to choose or not choose my boss. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that? If we could all just say, this is who I want or this is who I don't want. But I thought I might give you some of the positive aspects of this candidate. First, wouldn't it be great if all of our bosses knew what we were doing, knew what we were talking about, knew how to do what we do so that when we're absent, they can do it in our stead. Understood the ins and outs of our everyday job and all the stresses involved. That's Dennis. He's also pledged to me his 100% support of me. And he adds, as long as I'm doing my job, which I think you all know I do. So I feel that I'll get Dennis's support, and he'll understand what I'm talking about, and he'll know the ins and outs of what we're discussing at any Board of Health meeting. We also need a full Board of Health. I can't operate without a full Board of Health. Like you, we have hearings. We have issues that have to be discussed. We have decisions that affect people's lives that can't really wait for 2 or 3 meetings when there's a full board. Right now we're operating with 2 members on the board. If one is absent, we can't meet, and we have to wait another month or several more weeks before we can conduct business. It's just not the way to operate a Board of Health in a city this size. We've also discussed the free help. If Dennis is a board member as opposed to an employee who we hire whenever I'm absent, he'll go out and do the work in my absence without it costing anything to the city, which is a little bit of a benefit from a business aspect. There's also a couple of misconceptions. I reviewed the last meeting of the council on video at home and wanted to see what had been discussed. And the idea that a Board of Health member shouldn't go out and do health agent work is a misconception. We're lucky, we're a size city we are, we have a full-time health agent. In most communities, the smaller communities, there are no health agents, and it's the boards of health who do this work. That is their job. So for a Board of Health member to fill in at any time to do health agent work or to help a health agent or support a health agent is a totally appropriate part of the job. And right now, the other two board members, while they're very good at making policy and making decisions and having hearings and doing process, they're not really able to do what Dennis is able to do because they haven't done the job. That's a big plus. Finally, you know, health agents all get a bad rap. When I was working in the hill towns, I got a bad rap. You know, you have to make decisions that make people unhappy. Sometimes you have to say things that are very unpopular. You have to enforce regulations, whether you like the regulation or not. And sometimes you can empathize with people about not liking the regulation yourself, but you have to enforce it. And that doesn't make us very popular. And it's true, Dennis and I might have different working styles. They're both effective. He chose his style, I chose my style. We both get the job done. And Dennis and I, you know, we don't always see eye to eye. We are able to agree to disagree. We're able to debate and discuss and come to conclusions. And I'm sure that when he's on the Board of Health, if you will appoint him, that we'll do that. We'll continue to do that. It's a healthy kind of debate that we have. And he has some of the technical support, and he's been providing it to me for 3 years, that I need in this size city. Sometimes I'm not able to see the forest through the trees. Dennis helps me out sometimes by making things very clear. So, and I think I want to add one other thing, that in getting a bad rap, we all often don't get a good rap. You know, like many of us in our jobs, people pick out what we don't do right, but they don't pick out what we do right. I used to work as a social worker for the Department of Public Welfare in the 70s, and I spent many, many hours in this town working with poor families. And the housing in this town at the time was just atrocious. And that was in the 70s. So when I came to East Hampton to work, I was expecting that it was going to be quite a mess. So I was quite surprised when I got here and looked around in the first month or two that the housing has been considerably upgraded. And I attribute a lot of that to Dennis's rigid enforcement of the housing code. I think he cleaned up a lot of things, and sure, some landlords don't like that. Some landlords find the expense extraordinary. They don't like Dennis, perhaps because of that, but it has made an amazing impact on the whole public health of this city. And so for all those reasons, I think he would be a good appointment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak to the council? Okay, Councilor Winnie.
All right, so I will make the motion that we appoint Dennis R. LaCourse to the Board of Health with the term of expiration of December 31st, 2017.
Need a second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion, a second for appointing Dennis LaCourse to the board. Expiration date 12/31/17. Additional discussion. Sorry, Councilor Hayes first. Councilor Hayes.
Do we have to read any of the other letters that we've received out loud as well?
We have the opportunity to, certainly. I think it would only be fair.
Or they'll all be part of the public record and posted online?
No.
Well, we post it online, be part of the public record.
And
there.
I
Oh, they're
don't
just
have
part of the
copies
public.
of any of them.
You don't have copies of any of them? Okay.
Just so you know.
Councilor Riss, did you?
I just wanted to clarify that if a counselor receives a document and enters it into public record, that it should be given to the clerk because that is part of the public record.
So these
And
should all be part of the public
They would be made
record as
available to the public, the press, anybody, once you've read them. If you feel these are letters that the rest of the council should see, then by all means, read them. But that's,
My understanding is we all received these in our
again,
mailbox.
I think it's a matter of the fact that if the public wants to see these, they are now part of the public record and they can get them. You'll have to turn them in to the clerk when we're done.
Great.
Sorry.
Okay. Did you want to summarize any of them or say anything more or just?
We do have two letters that are objecting to the appointment. There's one stating that he was unprofessional, unreasonable, and divisive in his past position as health inspector. That was to the full city council. That's from my Stoddard. There's a more detailed letter from Marlise Stoddard, where actually she talks about how great Jackie Duda is, and an excellent report and accessible. But that the gist of it is that she feels like this is a real step backwards. And she's speaking, as a member of the business community, I know of several fellow owners who were subjected to Mr. LaCourse's abuse of his position with overly frequent visits, a bullying attitude, and wildly exaggerated interpretations of the law, but are reluctant to write of their concerns for fear of retaliation. This is not the sort of behavior we expect of our city officials, especially those whose job it is to police the cleanliness and conditions of existing local establishments. To pick fault out of thin air is not a professional approach. No other city official would dream of treating local citizens this way. So there was a lot of fear in the community about speaking out against this appointment for fear of, repercussions afterwards. So, but there are 2 letters that I'd like to put into the public record.
Okay. Any additional comments? Councilor Rist, I saw you first.
I do want to state that we did receive an email from a former city employee, a city nurse who worked under Mr. LaCourse, and that I will provide that letter to the clerk. That was an email sent to me, and then I forwarded. I thought it was also sent to President McCoy, and I forwarded it to all of you. I just want to state that I'm opposed to this. One of the reasons is because during my tenure, 20 years almost, I have received very few phone calls, except for the fact that I received numerous phone calls from septic system owners in my district. As you know, we've recently put in sewers, who were told that they had to upgrade their systems because there would never be sewers in our district. Very soon thereafter, we got sewers, and they were told that by the health inspector. The complaints I received about being bullied were numerous. Business owners have complained, and I've also got some that Councilor Hayes has. I am concerned about micromanagement from a person of character who feels his is the only way. I am not questioning Mr. LaCourse's qualifications. He does know the law. He knows it well. It's the manner and methodology that he employs when he is interacting with the public. And I also fear, and I don't think we can do anything about it, that he's going to be sent out, whether he's appointed or not, to do inspections when Ms. Duda is not here. I tell the council this: there are wounds in this community, wounds in my district, and wounds from business owners who have complained about how he interacts with them. Why are we opening these wounds? Are we that desperate? I know some health professionals. We need to get the word out that can be on the Board of Health. We don't need to open these wounds again if they're feeling that way. If Mr. LaCourse would like to serve the community, maybe on a different board, and I appreciate that. But these wounds are deep, as Councilor Hayes has indicated, and I think we all know that. And I think I urge the councilors not to make this appointment, because I think we're opening these wounds again and the doors again. We're going to get more complaints. So I can't support this. And I always support the mayor's nominations. I think this is the only one that I've said no to in all my years.
Councilor Winnie.
In all fairness, I would like to have the 2 letters, one from Jason Duda and one from Paul Duda, no relation to Jackie, that were in support of the appointment. So if you could, I've got the other letters there too, that were not in support, to give to the clerk so she can enter them.
There were multiple letters from the Dudas. Did we submit the correct
I only
ones?
have 4 that I'm submitting, so.
Right, it was the ones that mentioned
He
Board of
corrected
Health.
the wrong key there.
Okay.
Okay. Any additional questions or
I
comments?
just would like to respond briefly to Councilor Rist with regard to the folks who were told that their systems have failed, their septic systems. State law requires that if a system fails, it be replaced. There really is no gray area in that decision. It's a decision that has to be enforced. It's unfortunate, and no one wants to hear that they have to put in a $10,000 or $15,000 system or a $20,000 or $30,000 system. But if there isn't a sewer available at the time, one would have to enforce the state regulation. So I just wanted to make that clear that anyone who would be told there's no sewer, so you have to live by an enforcement, isn't going to be happy when all of a sudden the state comes up with the funds, and there was a new program that was developed that enabled us to be able to put sewers into the plans. So just wanted to make
I'll
that
give Councilor
clear.
Riss a chance to respond, because that's not exactly what I heard him say either.
I said that what he said was that they would never be in place, not that there were. And secondly, it wasn't about failing septic systems. It was about whether they could last another year or two, and he wasn't giving them discretion. But the point I'm trying to make is, when this was stated to my residents, there was a pipeline for the sewer systems to be replaced in place. I know this for a fact because Mayor Tosnick was at the time developing it. So a statement was made, and I have two residents who would have been here tonight, except that they are also at the Dollars for Scholar event, stated to me that they could not do anything because he said to them, there'll never be sewers here. And I, whether that's an accurate quote isn't the point. Why was there a debate like that? Why were they bullied? And they were bullied. And that's their quotes, not mine. Their quotes. They felt bullied. And I don't know what to say to it except that theirs wasn't the only complaints I received.
Certainly no one should feel bullied as a citizen by any public official. No one.
Okay. Any, Councilor Derby?
I just have a question, and this is a little bit off topic, but I think maybe Councilor Riss might be the process for increasing the size of the Board of Public Health. Because I feel like, I said this last time. I said last time, this is crazy that we have a 3-person board that performs such an important task in the city. It makes getting a quorum virtually impossible. So I would be a strong proponent to look at increasing that to 5 or another number. But
I can answer. Administrative code changes is believed necessary to increase the membership in a board, just like she's decreasing it in these. I believe by charter or by state law, and I'm not positive, needs to be initiated by the administration. We can't initiate that. Of course, we could debate it with the mayor and ask her to do that, but I'm pretty sure it has to be initiated by the mayor, and because we only have 60 days to approve it. So we can't initiate that code change, although I agree with you, it sounds like we should do it.
Any additional comments on this, Councilor Hagan?
Just quick, Councilor Winnie, the vote from the committee was?
We didn't take another vote.
No,
The last vote we had was 2-1.
No, 3-0.
3-0. 3-0.
2-0.
2-0. That's right.
That's right,
2-0.
No, 0-2.
0-2.
Yes.
2 against, and then, so, yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay. I just wanted, I
Yeah.
kind of remember that.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just wait a little here. I don't know, I've never had any dealings with Mr. LaCourse. I know him from being around the city hall and walking through the building. I look at letters, and I would assume a health agent is a very tough job. I'm sure people perceive it, I was in a kind of a profession like that myself, where you're not always making friends with people, but I also think that everyone should be treated respectfully, so I look at both sets of letters. And I take it all in and try to siphon it out. But what's troubling me a little more is the structure of how this is going to now sit. And I guess we currently have a new health agent who I've not heard any, again, no complaints myself. So I assume she's doing a very admirable job. And I don't know, to put like a former, I guess, any job, would you want the former boss to be like in a role where they're really looking at your decisions if someone appeals? I think it just, and then to compound it by that same person maybe at times going out and actually doing the inspections. And again, I have no reason to believe anybody on that board would be other than fair, but I guess if I was called in an appeal and I'm coming before a board of someone who's on the board but was acting as the health agent, I think my perception would be maybe that I'm not getting a fair, I guess a fair shake would be a way, or an independent review. And I'm not saying that's what would happen, because I think most, at least my experience of the boards in this city and all the boards, I think try to do a good job. They're all volunteers, and about 90% of them are volunteers. And it's tough to be on a board. It's not a job, and I think people try to do it. But I think we have to, at least in my mind, I'm trying to wrap myself around of the perception of someone who's kind of one day he's the health agent or the filling in health agent, and the next time you're going up, and I know he'd have to recuse himself on that decision, but he's still a board member. So that's kind of my apprehension at this point. Again, I'd like to hear what other counselors have to say, but.
Councilor Derby.
I would say that I'm in full agreement with Councilor Hagan. I think it does put a precarious structure in place, as a potential acting health agent, and then if you don't like that decision, appealing that, having to go to the board and seeing the board member who made that decision is now a board member, and then with the structure, I think if there was 5 people, then I would probably be more in favor of this, because there's a dilution of power. Right now, the power is so concentrated within a 3-person board, and then if he has to recuse himself, that's a 2-person board. And I believe the 2 people that are on the board were former supervisors. So it's a little too tight.
Okay. Any additional comments? If there's a,
I'd like to request a roll call vote, please.
okay, a roll call vote then. So again, if there's a motion for the appointment, so a yea would be for the appointment, and nay would be against the appointment. So a roll call, please.
Jennifer Hayes,
No.
J.P. Krasinski,
Pass.
what?
Pass.
Oh, and Joe McCoy,
No.
Dan Rist,
No.
Tamara Smith,
No.
Joy Winnie,
No.
Nathan Ziegler,
No.
Salem Derby,
No.
Dan Hagan,
No.
J.P. Krasinski.
No.
0-8,
Okay.
motion
Okay.
fails.
Okay, motion
So
fails.
motion failed, so moving on.
You didn't vote.
Or 9, sorry.
So moving on,
That one last one, too.
the next appointment is for Jane Sikowitz, who's our present personnel director, to the Contributory Retirement Board. And I will make it in the form of a motion that we appoint Jane Sinkowitz to the Contributory Retirement Board with the expiration date of December 31st, 2015.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second for Jane Sikowitz to the Contributor Retirement Board. Any additional comments? Councilor Winnie?
So, the discussion, the mayor was in our meeting along with Ms. Sikowitz. So the discussion was around why presently the finance director is on the retirement board, and our finance director has said, I don't want to be there anymore. And there's somebody there that's qualified, the training's coming up. I don't want to do the training. I feel that it's very close to a conflict of interest. I got a motion on the table. And so basically, it's not that she just has so much on her plate, and in the meantime, our personnel director, Ms. Sinkowitz, stepped up to the plate and said, well, I'll do it, because she's privy to a lot of the information that flows in and out of the retirement board. So a lot of it's not duplicating, but it's more of being in sync, so that it would make the flow of information, I think, a lot easier between the city side and the retirement side. She's more than willing to do it, and if anybody's ever been to any of those meetings, they're arduous and painful sometimes, and if she wants to step up to the plate to do it, then kudos to her. But it did, after our meeting and talking with Ms. Sikowitz and the mayor, it was voted 3-0 in subcommittee to go forth with the appointment in the positive. So.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so any more comment or discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, motion passes.
You're okay.
Okay, thank you.
Melissa's
So,
okay.
the next appointments are for a school building committee. All the appointments are till December 31st, 2017. The mayor was also in our meeting because I had some few questions for her. And then when I'm done giving my report, then Counselor Smith will then give her report. Basically, out of the 13 appointments, 7 are from the public. The rest of the appointments are appointments to because of Mass General Law. This is a school committee, building committee that is looking into building a new school, elementary school, to put together for the MSBA, which is the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And the MSBA is the first step in looking at a new elementary school is to put together a school building committee. So this is the first step in what will be a very long, tense debates going down the future. So out of the 13 appointments, the Mass General Law appointments, and I'm going to do them first. So I'm going to break the appointments apart if there's no objections to that. Or would you like me to just do all of the 13? Do them all? Okay. So I'm going to, if there's no questions now, then we can open it up for questions after I make.
Sure.
Then is that okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I'm going to make this that we voted 3-0 in the positive, that the City Council recommend for appointment John Atwater to the School Building Committee. All of the term of expires are December 31st, 2017. So John Atwater, Judith Averill, School Building Committee, which is the principal at Maple Street. She is presently under the Mass General Law as an appointment. David Boyle, School Building Committee. Patrick Bruff, School Building Committee. Thomas Brown, School Building Committee. Karen Cadger, which is the mayor, obviously, so she's an MGL appointment. Nancy Fallensby, our superintendent, MGL. Maren Goldstein, who is presently on the Energy Committee, but she is not an MGL appointment. The Counselor Hagan, which is not mandated by Mass General Law, but was offered up as
No, it is actually. I think that's a city council.
it is a city council? Okay, so that was a Mass General. Deborah Lusnia, who is the school chair, was an MGL appointment. Chief David Motter was not, but he is on the list. And then Peter Roy, who is our maintenance supervisor for the school department. And then, of course, Melissa Zawatsky, who's our finance director. The last 2 are MGL's appointments. So out of the 13, there's only 7 from the public. So.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, and additional comments. So I know Counselor Smith wanted to.
When we were talking about the set appointments earlier, my concern is that the majority of the people who are listed here do not have kids in elementary school, and the school focuses on an elementary school building. And in the history of talking about possible restructuring of the schools, there have been a series of meetings over the past several years that have been very hotly debated between parents. And I'm concerned that if we don't have a formal representative of each elementary school's interests sitting on this committee, that it could be very non-transparent in terms of the decisions that are being made. There was obviously a lot of discussion brought up about how this has been publicized, and I'm not criticizing that it hasn't been publicized, but I also am aware as a parent that most parents, as soon as they get a cold call or they get an email from the school district, they automatically know about news, but looking to the city, going to the school board meeting or going to the posts downstairs is not adequate for parents. So I think the lack of inclusion of a variety of parental figures or employees from the 3 different elementary schools is more of, I'm not saying that, I guess what I'm saying is that I would really like to see us move above and beyond the we have to post here in order to get volunteers and try some creative strategies to include more parents so that if they are not nominating themselves to be on the school building committee, it's really because they don't have the time or the interest, and not because they were not aware of it. Because all of the interest that I saw in the previous debates that were taking place really showed quite a bit of interest, and none of the parents that were very vocal and present are represented here. So I am concerned about that.
Yeah. And I guess, correct me if I'm wrong in interpretation, what I was impressed with, and I thought was, which I think is great about small government, is the mayor's kind of understanding that you make an excellent point, and that, we talked about other organizations and how you always have to work better to reach out the people you're not reaching, and I think that was a great point, and she was, as I agree, completely open to let's find those parents, because she agrees that a more diverse committee, the better. So I was glad it worked out. I think, did I see Councilor, I thought from the corner I saw Councilor Hayes's.
Yes, that was
first.
exactly a concern that I had. And I also think it would be appropriate to get input from the school committee themselves about being on this board. And yes, there's Mass General law that we're required to have certain individuals, but I think it would be nice if we gave like 3 or 4 spots to the school committee to help. This is a very important project, and the way this deal is structured is going to be really important, and I think it would behoove us to get the school committee involved.
Yeah, I mean, two members, the superintendent and obviously the president of the 3 are already from the school committee, but certainly.
Well, from the school department, yeah.
School department.
They're not from the school committee. They're just
chair
from
of the school. 2 are from the school committee. Because Nancy Folsby is on the school committee, right? And so is Deb Luzner.
And so is the mayor.
And so is the mayor. Councilor Riss. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I did see you end first.
Let him have it.
Councilor
It's
Kuczynski.
fine.
Yeah, no,
Councilor
I saw that.
Kuczynski has the floor.
You'll be able to speak in a moment. I think you bring up some wonderful points, both of you. In terms of the way the committee is formed and the number of people who are allowed, are we allowed to make subsequent appointments to the committee?
No, we don't
Well,
make them.
no.
Are we now?
The mayor is
No,
the
mayor.
we're approving appointments, so we have no influence over whether the mayor offers us additional appointments.
Well, we can ask her.
Right, yeah.
We did ask her at the appointments committee.
You did? What did she say?
And she said that she would be comfortable with having up to 15 people on this committee, and currently there are 13 names that were forwarded, which leaves 2 additional possible slots. And
And let me just check. City Clerk, is it limited to 15? Is that? Did you tell me that it's?
That's how many are posted downstairs.
Okay, but is there a limit from? Do you know it's from the state
I don't know what
of
the
a limit?
makeup is required to be.
Okay. Councilor Winnie?
Yeah, I think the biggest concern about making this committee too big is that these meetings will take place weekly when they start getting going at 9:30 in the morning. And if you don't have a quorum there for these meetings, then the bigger you are, the harder it is to get people in. And so the bigger you are, the bigger your quorum's going to be. So that could impede the process, is how it was explained to me. And that was her concern. She had no concerns with going to 15. And she said, she fully listened to Tamara and actually had some very good input and said, I will go to the meetings with you to talk to the parents and whatever, and, and explain that. But also, all of these meetings are going to be on the air, just like all of our meetings are. They're going to be publicized as open meetings, just like our meetings are. They're not a little, back in the back room type of things. It's absolutely not that. So I'm just, giving you the whatever. I know that our last building committee, there was a lot of people that started off gung-ho and then ended up dropping off as the process went through, and we ended up appointing people. As people came off, we appointed people onto the committee. You're not talking something that's going to be in place for a year. You're talking, yes, the appointments only go to 2017. I can assure you that this committee is going to go well beyond the 2017. I think the high school was a committee that was, what? 12 years. 12 years. 12 years. So this is just the initial committee that we need to give to the MSBA to start the process of just talking and getting ourselves into the position of looking at all of this. So just, I'm putting it out there.
Councilor Hayes.
Do we have the letters of interest from the people on the committee?
No, I don't, because these are mayoral appointments. They are not.
So they were posted and
They
then
were
people
posted
submitted
and
letters of interest, or?
She
did
got the letters of interest, and she, and I would imagine that, I didn't ask her this question, but I would imagine that the superintendent was involved in it, because the superintendent in a building project like this has to be intimately involved in every step of the process, so.
Isn't it usual course for appointments with letters of interest to have
That's
those
what I
letters be
thought.
shared with the counselors?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of,
Not all.
not
These are
always.
all known people, most of them.
Mhm.
so.
But
Not
the
from-
letters of, I mean, in some respect too,
Whatever she gives me
these
is
are
you
mayoral appointments. And so it is for us to approve or disapprove. But ultimately, I think these are her appointments as she moves forward. I saw Councilor Riss was waiting here. Councilor Riss.
I just wanted to echo what Councilor Winnie said. The last building committee took 12 years from point of inception to the shovel in the ground for this high school. And I wanted to state that because there's people out there saying, oh my God, they're going to build a new school. Well, no, not for a long time. This is the initial inception. And although I could support building a new school tomorrow personally, I know that a lot of people would be concerned about that. The school building committee needs to be formed so we could even get the process started. It takes years to get funding even considered. And it'll be years before it goes before the voters. So I don't want people to be alarmed that yes, we are setting up a committee. Yes, we need a new elementary school. We knew that years ago. But this is going to be a long process. So, and there's going to be a lot of room for public input because at every hearing I went to, they have public speak time. Parents will be allowed to echo their support or, echo their comments. So I just wanted to state that so people aren't nervous.
This is almost like a discovery process type of thing.
required by law.
If you just wanna, think of it as that way. This is a group that we have to put together per law by the MSBA, just to go out and just to start having the conversation. They won't even touch or look at us without a building committee in place to even talk to us, so.
Councilor Hagan?
Just full disclosure, as you always say, because I'm on the list and obviously will abstain when the vote comes. I didn't seek the position. The mayor asked, I think based on my being on finance, but certainly if we put this off a meeting, I certainly would have no problem. Well, I go to a lot of meetings. I would have no problem.
I know, I try to schedule you.
If like Councilor Smith wanted to take, again, if the mayor's willing, I mean, because again, that wouldn't, again, I don't know her feeling if it was just because I was on finance, but I mean, that's.
No, I can tell you that the transgression is again, by state law, we needed to have a representative of city council. She contacted me, asked me if I wanted to be on it.
So I was second.
But also, I think you're already working with the finance committee, weren't you, on school?
Well, I sit on the superintendent's advisory committee now, so again, I do sit there where they try to improve the image of the.
Right. So that's, I recommended you, that's how you got attached.
I just was saying that if we put this off a vote, I certainly, if Councilor Smith really has and you do have a lot of children in the schools. I mean, certainly I would have no problem stepping aside and having you take the city council appointment. I mean,
She's also on sabbatical.
well, that's even better.
So she has time.
But probably not for 7 or 8 years.
Well,
No, but,
But this is getting out of hand.
yeah.
Councilor Wynn.
And Councilor Rist is right. We can vote to the nominations, and we can not vote for Counselor Hagan, and then ask the mayor if she would consider bringing forth the appointment of Counselor Smith. I don't think the mayor would have a problem with that. Oh, well, maybe we have another
No, I just want
volunteer.
I don't even think we would necessarily have to preclude Councilor Hagan. There's 15 spots. There's only 13 people. I don't see why we couldn't have another city councilor on that, unless procedurally, if there was a problem with that. I don't know.
My concern of what's missing from this list again is representatives from all 3 elementary schools. The special education, I don't see anyone representing that. Judy Averill possibly, but right now her role is as a principal. So while I can appreciate that, I would not want to take up the space of having more inclusivity on the board. So, I mean, I would be very happy to be this person and fulfill that role, and I appreciate that offer.
Because the role we're dealing with has to come from the city council.
Yep.
And so, it has to be one of us. And if obviously you fit the point you are talking about, someone who is invested obviously in the elementary school, I am on concern about, we typically, appointment goes to subcommittee first. I don't know if we could do this all tonight. But we can certainly not vote him for Councilor Hagan tonight. Councilor Rist.
I'm just going to state that I know 90% of the people on this list I know well. I am not in favor of holding these appointments up. I think we should do it to get the process started. I know for a fact that we'll be reappointing people very soon, within a year, because other people will move off of this committee. And there will be openings, plus there's 2 more that can't happen. So I think Councilor Smith's comments will be heard and have been heard by the mayor, so I'm not concerned about that. And all of these people have served a lot before, and I think they will add a lot to it. They know the ins and outs of building committee needs. They are very experienced, a lot of them, so I don't see the reason to hold this up.
I would never hold it up, but I would, again, have no problem removing my friend Councilor Hagan's name.
Well, that's a different subject.
Councilor Ziegler.
I'm in full support of keeping Councilor Hagan's name on that list. I think he would be a wonderful candidate to be part of that committee, and I'm against removing his name this evening.
Okay, well, all right. So we have a motion on the
Okay,
floor,
there's
so
more
that would have to
discussion,
be
but
an
is there any
amendment.
more discussion on this, or are we ready to take a vote on this?
I'd like to redirect back, in terms of the people, how can we reach the people that you think are being left out at this point?
The mayor and I spoke about approaching the school board and seeing if they would consider using one of the public outreach tools that the school district has to reach parents. So typically any parent within the district has the ability to get a robocall and an email, and there's also, you could send correspondence home with the actual children for their parents to check. So there are definitely inclusive ways to do that.
Let's push those.
Yep.
And the press, I'm sure, will help tonight.
Councilor Hayes.
Thank you for
I'd like
being
to see
here.
it online as well. I'd like to see technology really be used by City Hall and City Council, and I think it definitely should be online. Like anything that's on the bulletin board and posted should be online. I'd like to see our, City Council packets digitally before we get to the meeting, before they're in our mailbox, and so maybe this can be the impetus to put something together where we can start to get a little bit more technologically advanced with how we're moving paper around with City Council.
Okay. Any more discussions on this, Councilor Hagan?
I guess I'll just go back for 1 second.
No.
Again, I have no problem, and I appreciate what Councilor Ziegler said. I have no problem, again, if you want to move everybody but mine until Councilor Smith can talk to the mayor. Again, I really have no problem with that at all. Really, it's, I think it's good that, I'm not going to have any children in the school system at this point. I think, Councilor Smith would be a very good choice. Again, if it's the mayor's will. I mean, it's the...
I saw Councilor Rist first.
I think there might be a point where they need to get this committee formed for legal purposes, and we need to legally have a council member on it. So I think the methodology would be for you to make sure that Tamara is being appointed before you remove yourself, so that they can move forward with whatever legalities are required. And Melissa is shaking her head, so I guessed correctly. So I think we shouldn't remove Counselor Hagan because he's a necessary appointment. Although I agree with Counselor Ziegler too, he's a good appointment.
Yes. But I also want to add, though, that I think Counselor Smith would also be a wonderful addition as one of the potential up to the 15. But again, I really am in support of Counselor Hagan with his extensive knowledge. But I didn't want you to think that. Well, I'm sorry, with finance and in the history and everything else. Sorry.
I'm sorry. You did raise your hand.
Yeah.
I did. I was just talking about the process and thinking that you could recuse yourself. It was just, I think we've worked through that, and the process is that we don't want him to recuse himself at this time.
Right.
However, there is plenty of opportunity to be a non-member who attends the meetings. They're public meetings. So, but I think one needs to say that they're willing to go the long haul, because it is a long haul.
And during daytime hours, frequently too. Councilor Wayne, did you have something?
No, I was just going to say that we should move the full slate ahead. I'm going to call for the vote. With no more discussion. And if Councilor Hagan decides that he's overloaded, then he certainly has all of the rights to step down, which would then open up the city council appointment. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was a motion, a second. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passed.
abstain.
One abstention.
Right.
Motion passes.
Appointment is done.
I have, can I just do this for new business
Sure.
and then just get it done? We have a new appointment for John Phillips to the Council on Aging. Could I please make a motion to send that down to Appointment Subcommittee?
Second. A motion, a second to move the appointment. John Phillips to Council on Aging to Appointment Subcommittee. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
And our next Appointment Subcommittee meeting will be on June 3rd. That's our next meeting at 5:30 down in Conference Room B.
Okay, thank you.
That ends my report. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Ordinance, Councilor Derby.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm pleased to report that the Ordinance Subcommittee has wrapped up our public hearings with the Planning Board on the size restrictions for buildings over 50,000 square feet. We have the recommendation. So at this point, I'd like to set a public hearing for June 17th.
Thank you.
At 6:15 in these chambers.
Second.
To allow for the full docket.
Okay, we have a motion for setting a public hearing at June 17th, 6:15 p.m. in these chambers. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll
Abstained?
abstain on that one, too.
Another abstention? Okay.
I've recused myself on that one, so.
And I do want to, we are going to try to meet next Wednesday, which is the 27th, at 6 p.m. At which time we will be discussing, is that next Wednesday, the 27th?
We have a finance meeting, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So, well, anyway, we
Yes.
are gonna, next Wednesday, the 27th, at 6 p.m. here in a space to be determined. We're gonna look at the request from the fire chief, look at the fire codes, as well as, we're still probably going to give our final nod to the building size provision. We might be discussing that as well.
Okay.
So, that concludes.
Okay, thank you. Property, Councilor Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Property Subcommittee met this evening to continue the discussion on the removal of the housing restriction at 154 Everett Street. Previously, we were discussing the process of Habitat for Humanity and the memo of understanding, and when they were looking to build units on that piece of property. There was a memo, I believe it was in 2012, where they were looking to complete the process, at least within 2012, regarding the building permits, and that process never took place. We discussed tonight the timeline again, and the Habitat may be able to build properties on that parcel in 2020. They might have one unit and then another unit by 2022. We did look at the funds that were expended on the property. There were CPA funds totaling $32,715, and approximately $150,000 in brownfield cleanup funds that were expended through state and federal funds, in addition to about $30,000 to $50,000 that were spent in municipal funds to actually take the property for non-payment of taxes. We did vote this evening 3-0 in favor of removing the restriction, and we've also presented a letter this evening from John Fitzgibbon regarding the property, and that a public hearing is not required for the council to move forward with a vote to remove the restriction. So I would like to move to the full council this evening that we remove the affordable housing restriction on 154 Everett Street in the form of a motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to remove the affordable housing restriction on 154 Everett Street. Any additional comments or questions? Councilor Ziegler?
One other additional comment I wanted to make, though, was the input that at the time that the affordable housing restriction was placed on the property, that was prior to the 38 units of affordable housing being put into that neighborhood. So it's not that we're removing affordable housing from that neighborhood. The council has since added many more units.
Great. Councilor Derby?
Just another point, since there were CPA funds used in the auspices of affordable housing, if any money that's made from that parcel will go towards paying back the CPA.
Okay.
Which was $32,715.
Right. Councilor Rist?
Is that state law? I mean, is that something we have to put in this motion, or is that state law that they have to do that if we remove the affordable housing?
That was my understanding, that we would have to pay that back again, because it was the CPA funds were used with the expectation that it was going to be for affordable housing, and now we're changing that.
I'd like to ask that the motion be removed so I could ask that question of the finance director or the mayor. Can I ask that the motion be removed in the second? Can I?
Speak to that?
Well, I'll second that. I'll second that motion just to remove it so we can get additional discussion on that.
So we have to vote on it.
I guess I rather than remove it, to certainly say that we could amend it. I think we could
We
come
don't
up
need
with
to
an
amend
amendment
it.
to say that the monies would have to be first paid, the CPA. It is a requirement.
Yeah.
Well, I would
Well, it doesn't need
rather,
to have
I'd
the-
like the finance director to affirm
speak
it,
on it,
and I
right.
just asked that the motion be removed so that we could do that. So we have to vote
Can I
on
remove
it.
the
Motion.
motion?
Yeah, second that
There
we
was no
remove the
second.
All right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Finance Director, would you mind speaking to that question?
So we did get an opinion from DOR Legal that the proceeds from the sale would go back to CPA.
Louder, please.
We did get an opinion from DOR Legal saying that the proceeds of the sale would have to go back to the CPA affordable housing account.
So you got a legal opinion, that was what we would be needed to do.
Yep.
So because of that, there's no requirement to put that in the motion, do you believe? Because that is, okay.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to make sure, the DOR. Good.
Okay.
Thank you. We could have the motion again. Sorry, Nathan.
Not a problem. I motion that we remove the affordable housing restriction on 154 Everett Street.
Second.
Motion second to remove the restriction on affordable housing on 54 Everett Street. Any additional comments, Councilor Hagan?
I certainly support it. I was at the meeting. I guess I'm just a little confused. Will there be a subsequent meeting on like any conditions or conditions of sale? I mean, you guys talked a little about like
Process,
possible minimum price or whatever, or is that something that the mayor will handle? I mean,
I
guess
would like to move it forward to the mayor, clean as is, and let her develop an RFP if that's the process she decides to go with.
Good. I agree with that.
Okay, any additional questions or comments on that? Councilor Kozinski?
I'd like to see the site cleaned up and something good and positive there, so let's move this along.
Good.
Okay, so we have motion a second. Although in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained? Motion passes. New business.
That's complete.
We haven't touched that yet, have you, Councilor Hagan?
Did we move the mayoral?
Yeah, we covered that.
Yeah.
We have 5 supplemental appropriations I'll do a first reading on. The first one, dated May 14th, 2015. Request is hereby made for approval of following appropriation. The amount requested is $50,000 to be appropriated from the enterprise retained earnings, and that amount, $50,000, and appropriated to the water meters capital, $50,000. The amount requested be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for the purchase of water meters. I'll read all these and then move them all in one motion. The second is a supplemental appropriation dated May 14th, 2015, Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $50,000 to be appropriated from enterprise retained earnings, and that amount and appropriated to the wastewater treatment plant pump station upgrades capital. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for repairs and upgrades to the sewer pump station. The third supplemental appropriation dated May 14th, 2015. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. Amount requested is $60,000 to be appropriated from enterprise retained earnings, $60,000 to be appropriated to water skid steer loader capital, $60,000. The amount requested for the following purpose: to provide funds for the purchase of a skid steer loader. The fourth appropriation, dated May 14th, 2015, request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $125,000 to be appropriated from enterprise retained earnings, and that amount, $125,000, and appropriated to the water mini excavator capital, $125,000. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for the purchase of a small excavator. And finally, the final one, supplemental appropriation, is dated May 14th, 2015. The amount requested for approval is $125,000 to be appropriated from enterprise retained earnings, and that amount and appropriated to the wastewater treatment plant headworks bar screen capital. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for the replacement of the headworks bar screen. In the form of a motion, move that all 5 of those items be moved to the Finance Committee for review.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to move the previous read supplemental appropriations to finance. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
I guess this is mine too.
Yep.
And the final one is a bonding borrowing request dated May 14th from Mayor Cadger, requesting the following. The amount requested is $1 million to be funded by borrowing, and it's to be borrowed or bonded for the purpose of paying costs of a feasibility study and design for a new school. And in the form of a motion, I'd request that that also be sent to the Finance Committee for review.
Second.
A motion and a second to send to finance the request for $1 million bonding borrowing request. Additional discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Just before well, just one thing on these new items. Because we're having the extra meeting, I will hopefully will be able to set a public hearing, which I won't do tonight because we have to review them, and hopefully we'll get them all reviewed before the June 17th meeting. So hopefully I'll be ready on the 3rd to move those to public hearing.
Actually, that made me think, Council Winnie, is there any documentation on the assessors you would like to move?
I handed you out all of the posting for the assessors, and I had our personnel manager come up with a proposed procedures for the selection of the assessors. This is basically putting it into writing, what we have done in the past, and some interview questions. I would ask that this be put down into our subcommittee of appointments to be reviewed and talked about, and then I'll make sure that all of you get your copies of what this is in your inboxes. So, no, you don't. You don't have it yet. Yeah, I only got it just tonight. So, so I would ask that we move these down to the appointment subcommittee, please.
Second. Is there a motion second to move the beginning documentation for questions and evaluations and job description to appointments? Again, and make the point that, the appointment subcommittee reviews this, but all counselors are allowed to participate. Obviously, they can't take part of the vote as a committee, but they're allowed to participate in discussion. So on that motion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you very much. See you.